Nau mai haere mai ki tēnei hui o te kaunihiro o ngā roto o Rotorua. Welcome everybody to this meeting of the Rotorua Lakes Council. Just a reminder to everyone that this meeting is being live streamed, so if you could please have your mobile phones on silent. Before we get underway with the formalities, I'd just like to invite Councillor Waru to open up this meeting with a mihi, and then also Councillor Maxwell to do our karakia for this morning. Kia ora, Councillor Waru.
Kia tihei mauri ora. A tēnā tātou e te whare, te ara wawaka, ara mai, ngā iwi o te motu, haera mai, kia o tau mataara mai, roto kākahi, o kuri o ko taitai huanga, o te iwi Māori, hara mai, hara mai, hara mai. Hara mai ki te whakarongo ki ngā kōrero, hara mai, ki te ruku ki ngā kaupapa kai mua i te arawaru i tēnei rā. Hara kāti, ka reo te hi e te whakaroa i te kaupapa, e mihi noa ki tēnei kia koe te hara mai nei, ki te tautoko i tā koutou i hia hiai. Nā reira, koe nei noho te karanga ki a koutou hara mai, hara mai, hara mai. Nā reira, Uncle Jeff, kai a koe te rākau ki te karakia. Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor Waru, for the warm welcome to everybody here this morning. He no tātou, let us pray. E te atua whakatū wheratia mai kia mātou, ngā kuaha o te tika, o te pono o te māramatanga i tēnei wāinga wā katoa. Ko ihu kraiti hoki tō mātou kai whakaora. Amen.
Amen.
May the grace of God and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us now and evermore. Amen.
Amen.
Kia ora koutou.
Kia ora, ngā mihi nui kia korua, Councillor Waru ko Councillor Maxwell. Well, welcome everyone. As we do have many members of the public present today, just a quick reminder, if there is any emergency and we do need to evacuate, the emergency exits are just immediately outside this door and on the right. If you are in need of some water or the wharepaku, it's just down the hall and on the left as well. So thank you to everyone who is joining us in the gallery. Just a reminder that these public meetings are an opportunity to observe and to listen, but there is no speaking or interjecting. So we please just ask everyone to remain seated, and also that this is a safe space for all. So in the rare instance that there is any disruptive or disorderly behaviour, you may be asked to leave and we may just have to adjourn the meeting. But it is fantastic to see so many people here, and thank you very much, Councillor Waru, for your warm welcome to them all. We will take a short break around 11 a.m. So before we get underway, I'd just like to call for any apologies. There do appear to be none, but I just want to acknowledge that Councillor Barker is joining us online today. Kia ora, Councillor Barker. So as there are none, we will move on. Is there any declarations of interest this morning? No. Are there any urgent items not on the agenda? Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Your Worship. I wish to draw the Council's attention to a significant decision of the Court of Appeal that was released last month. I think this particular decision will be helpful for staff and elected members going forward. It's the case of Thorndon Quay Collective versus Wellington City Council. The Wellington Council was judicially reviewed in relation to changes to car parking, but what the decision does is it sets out clearly the responsibilities of council staff and the responsibilities of elected members. In particular, attention is drawn by the court to section 77 of the Local Government Act, and that section requires staff in their reports to present all reasonably practicable options to elected members. I don't believe that happened in the case of the Springfield Golf Club lease last meeting, and I think that's perhaps the reason why the meeting became awkward and difficult. So I will circulate this particular decision to all the elected members.
Sorry, Councillor Lee, just on relevance, what exactly is your urgent item that's requiring discussion today?
I'm simply drawing this particular decision
Point of order, Madam
for
Chair.
the benefit of
Relevance.
We have had a point of order of relevance. Is there something?
I understand the pānui, but it's not a kaupapa we need to make any decision on right now, is it?
No, it's not a decision. I'm not seeking a decision. I'm simply...
I urge you to stick to our standing orders, Madam Chair. Kia ora.
It's relevant because it applies to every future council meeting, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. What I'll do is I'll ask the Chief Executive to have a discussion with you immediately after this, just to clarify what it is that you're requesting. But as it isn't an urgent item, we will carry on. Thank you. Were there any further urgent items? Yes, Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Your Worship. Some 2 months ago, during the long-term plan process,
Sorry, could you just state what your urgent item is?
Yes, I'm seeking an update on the working group that Council said would be established in relation to the Airbnbs. How's that working group?
Sorry again, Robert, but point of order again, Madam Chair.
Yeah, sorry.
Relevance.
Councillor Lee, that is not an urgent item, but staff are undertaking that work of terms of reference, and it will be coming to our committee, our Community and District Development Committee, at the next possible opportunity. So we will carry on. Are there any further urgent items? Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Not an urgent item, a minor matter that I would like an action point to carry on from. It's based on the email that you sent to us last night, which was an action point carried on from an infrastructure and environment meeting, which we requested a map be posted showing the areas proposed to be fluoridated for Rotorua. So thank you very much for that. That was done. However, I would like to point out that the tone of the rest of that page seems to indicate that we will be fluoridating. The words used are will all throughout, not would or proposed. My concern is that that may lead to some consternation in the community, that we are proceeding with fluoridation when we have not agreed to do so. Councillor Waru even stipulated quite clearly that he wanted it known that we were only accepting the funding to move ahead with implementation, and therefore I request that that be rewritten to make sure that that is clear, that it is not being proceeded with until the relevant judicial reviews, etc., have taken place. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm happy to take that minor matter relating to the business of council, and I'll get the Chief Executive to review the language that was used in the website. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship.
But it was positive to get that up for our community to see, and the map of where it's intended to occur at some future time. There appear to be no further urgent items, so we will get underway with our council business today. So first of all, we just need to quickly confirm the minutes of the council meeting held on 24th of July is true and correct. That's moved by Councillor Wang, seconded by Councillor Kai Fong. Is there any discussion or corrections needed?
If I may, Madam Chair. I just have a question. In the minutes, obviously that was a very busy meeting, as Councillor Lee pointed out. I'm just seeking some assurance, if I can, because it is not shown in the minutes from the meeting of 24th of July, the amendment regarding the lease for Springfield Golf Course. I'll just read out the transcript, if I may. 1 second, please, while I bring it up. There was a rather relevant point that's missing. So Councillor Lee asked, can we have an option prepared for us that does not include an alternative lease clause, and you can provide your advice to us about that? C. Moraes responded, in order to provide Council with all the options under the Local Government Act, that would be something I would be covering in my advice in the paper anyway. I'd just like to seek assurance that that indeed is going to happen.
That's correct, Councillor Patterson.
Thank you.
Thank you. And just a reminder, the minutes don't capture the discussion verbatim, just the final decision points and any requested action points. But otherwise, what's discussed at the meeting is intended to happen. Okay, so if there are no further corrections, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Thank you. Now, the first item on our agenda today is the public forum. Following that, we will be going straight to the Māori wards discussion before continuing with a financial update, an amendment to council standing orders, and then our progress reports as well. So we want to welcome everyone to our first public forum. So what public forums are is they are a period of time for the public to address elected members during a meeting of council. Speakers have a maximum of 5 minutes to do so. We will have a timer in front of us, and you will hear a bell at 30 seconds. So today, speaking to us, we have Joe Keenan and also Jared Adams. So I'd like to now invite Joe Keenan to come up and to make a presentation. Kia ora, Joe. We welcome you. And if you could please just push that button until the green light's on so the live stream can hear you. And when you're ready, you may get underway.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you all very much for having me speak today. So one thing the thing I'm here to speak about is to outline my concerns about or an issue which might undermine Rotorua Lakes Council and Rotorua NZ's $450,000 investment into strengthening Rotorua's reputation. As part of the 2024 to 2034 long-term plan, the Council adopted 9 outcomes, including the goal of making Rotorua a world-class destination with a vibrant inner city and a positive reputation. A targeted investment of $450,000 was allocated to Rotorua NZ specifically to campaign to rebuild and strengthen Rotorua's reputation. There have been a number of statements recently, including Andrew Wilson, the Chief Executive of Rotorua NZ, who stressed that building back our image as a destination is a way forward. In Rotorua's statement of intent for 2023 to 2024, again, it focused on the restoration of our reputation as a vibrant city and world-class destination. In the draft statement of intent for 2024 to 2025, it was emphasised the 3-year plan, again, we would strengthen Rotorua's reputation. The Kāinga Ora development on 149 Ferry Springs Road directly threatens that reputation. And the reason that I'm here to say that is if we think about the importance of that location, the strategic importance, it's immediately next to Rotorua Canopy Tours, next to Skyline Rotorua, next to the Zorb, next to the 3D Art Gallery, next to the mini golf, Amakura Glass, Ferry Springs Motel, Ripple Motel, Awa Motel, probably countless other businesses in that area. It is clearly a very strategically important location for our city and to our tourism sector. Collectively, these businesses see in excess of 500,000 tourists a year. So that alone will tell you how important it is to our tourism sector. That $450,000 investment would be undermined by continuing with that development to stay there. I want to quickly switch into looking at home ownership rates as well. So as part of our sort of proposal here, or our suggestion, home ownership rates are actually declining. In 1991, they were at 73.8%. In 2023, they were at 58.7%, and they're projected to go down to 47.9%. Our position as a community, as the businesses around there and as the residents, has been that we should sell that housing to first home buyers. We should use the revenue that's generated out of that to fund a more appropriate location for the Kāinga Ora homes. And we should, by doing that, we've actually generated about 15 rental properties would come free from the first home buyers selling theirs. We would be able to generate another 15 Kāinga Ora properties as well. So there's definitely a win-win on that front. I do need to make it clear that all of our community is definitely supportive of Kāinga Ora housing and social housing as well. We just think the specific location here, the benefits don't outweigh the risks in this location. So we need to be really careful around that. So we think it's a far better solution to get people out of motels. So for me, I'd like to call on all of you as a council to advocate for our city, to think about what it is that we can do and what you should be doing to actually stick up for our tourism and balance the needs of both the social housing and the tourism sector going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joe. We appreciate you coming to speak to us about the broader impacts of housing and also reputation, which is important for us. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd now like to invite our second speaker for our public forum. We welcome Jared Adams to the table, who will be speaking about council fines. Kia ora, Jared.
Kia ora, thank you so much for having me today. As you most know, my name is Jared Adams. I also want to actually thank everyone that's attending today. Quite oftenly, not many people attend council meetings, so I'm glad everyone's here for whatever reason they are. I was hoping more people were speaking, but that's all good. So I want to first off I want to start this by expressing my appreciation to the elected councillors, mayor and council staff for introducing public forums after more than 20 years of them being unavailable to Rotorua. This is a vital function that allows the public to engage openly and honestly with the council. However, I'm here today to address the serious concerns I have about the current system in place, particularly concerning the handling of fines. Recent data, and I mean, the only thing I can talk about today is about the dog fines, because that's the only thing I was able to get Lagoima information about, so that's what this is based on, is the Lagoima information I've received. So recent data shows a dramatic increase in the number of fines issued by council, particularly in the 23 to 24 period, where 2,041 infringements were issued, representing a 236.5 increase from the previous year. This raises significant questions about the accuracy and fairness of these fines. In my case, I received a fine that not only was inaccurate but also lacked a transparent and fair process for dispute resolution. I contacted and emailed the full elected council about the issues with dog control in 2023 and again in 2024 to ensure they were aware of the issues. Despite this, I have yet to see meaningful action to address these concerns. Between June 2023 and August 2024, there were 133 disputes lodged against fines, reflecting a broader issue that many of the members in our community are facing. This is not just about individual errors, it is indicative of a system at times that fails to ensure fines are based on an accurate and factual information before being imposed. Moreover, the number of cases sent to court has increased by 245% over the same period, further straining both the public and judicial system. Another alarming trend is a significant increase in unregistered dogs, which saw an 875% spike increase from 2022-2023 to the 2023-2024. Following a 33.9% decrease the previous year. This sharp rise not only suggests potential issues with the new computer system, but also raises concerns about the council's ability to manage and enforce regulations effectively and fairly. These issues are not isolated. This is the dog control. It's just, in my opinion, is a single example, but I believe it reflects broader challenges within the council and other departments that impose fines on the public, such as parking enforcement, water rates dispute, and general council penalties. If dog control fines have increased by such enormous amounts, we must ask how many other departments are experiencing similar trends. Recently, I became aware of issues with water rates, which further heighten my concern about transparency and accountability of the council. I also note that the council is considering adding new measures to dog control, such as DNA testing, which I do support in principle. However, my biggest concern is the council is currently unable to enforce or regulate fines in a fair manner before adding more costs and complications onto the public, who are the end users. I urge the council to focus on doing the core things it's supposed to be doing. Many elected councillors have promised to stop the spend, and it's vital that these promises are reflected in responsible, transparent governance that prioritises fairness and accountability. In closing, I do want to ask with the public forums, I'm just wondering if they will, I don't expect this answered, but other districts don't restrict the public forums, such as Rangatiki, where the residents are able to freely turn up and speak without any restrictions or prerequisite requirements. A council should be a bastion of democratic values, not a censorship-driven organisation afraid of the truth. Thank you for your time. Hopefully you will investigate some of these statistical improbable issues, which I'd rather call impossible, as I know I'm not the only person having some difficulties with council.
Thank you very much, Jared, for your well-researched public forum presentation. Thank you. We have received no petitions or notices of motions, so we will go straight to our first staff report today. We have our Local Government Electoral Legislation in Māori Wards and Māori Constituencies Amendment Act 2024. We are on page 29 of our agenda. Can I please have a mover and a seconder to receive this report? That's moved by Councillor Waru, seconded by Councillor Lee. All those in favour to receive it, please say aye. Aye. And I'd now like to invite our Chief Executive, Andrew, to overview this report.
Thank you, Your Worship. And reflecting on my voice, which is somewhat lacking today, I'm going to be as economical as possible with my words. I will take the report as read and just provide a few comments to explain the recommendation from myself, from staff. And that is, Council made a decision to adopt Māori wards. That decision had a lifespan of 2 electoral terms. We are halfway through the first one of those, and in light of the fact that the intent of having 2 terms is it gives Council and the public the opportunity to understand how those Māori wards work, how the representation actually represents the community. That period of time hasn't passed, where, as I said, we're halfway through the first one of those terms, and therefore my recommendation, staff recommendation, is that those wards, the current representation arrangements, stay in place for the next election as well, and that timing would then be consistent with the previous decision Council has made. That, as a result of the legislation, that would then require a binding referendum along with the 2025 elections to take place, to inform, the 2028 elections. So on that basis, I will happy to take any further questions, but basically to explain that the legislation requires us to make a decision. It's very, I have not seen any arguments to change the decision of Council made when Māori wards were adopted, and therefore my recommendation is to retain those arrangements and proceed as required by the legislation to a poll next year. Thank you.
Thank you. So what we'll do is we'll open up for any questions, if there are any. I think this is a fairly straightforward matter. As you've heard, the recommendation is that we retain. So I'll open up for questions before I then ask for a mover and a seconder, and we can then have discussion at that stage. Councillor Waru.
Not a question at this stage. I just want to indicate that I wish to move the motion when required. Kia ora.
Thank you. We note that. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Your Worship. In 2021, when the Council made this decision, who was consulted?
It is well detailed in the report. Everyone.
I don't believe that's the case. My recollection from 2021 is that the Te Tātou o Te Arawa conducted a consultation among the various entities of Te Arawa, but actually the public were excluded from consultation.
Point of order, Madam Chair. Misinformation. Te Tātou o Te Arawa informed all of Te Arawa. Me ngā iwi katoa e noho mai ana ki a Te Arawa. So, thank you.
Thank you. We do note that. That is correct.
18 months.
Well, let me clarify the question. Were non-Māori consulted about the change to the representation arrangements in 2021?
Through you, Madam Chair, I think that's not, in my view, my advice is that that's not entirely relevant to this topic. The decision here is really about proceeding going forward rather than, and I'm sorry I'm not able to answer questions specifically around the past, because what this is about going forward. So in regard to that, what we currently have is the current representation arrangements. The recommendation is that we retain them and proceed to a poll.
If I can just chime in here to perhaps give you some information that the forums that were held were open to Te Arawa and the whole public katoa. So, kia ora.
Sorry, we need to make sure that you go through the chair. We don't talk through each other, but we do take that as I've mentioned. It was consultation.
Apologies, Madam Chair. Kia ora.
It's okay. Councillor, do you have any further questions relevant to the decision that we have before us today?
Yes. I acknowledge under the changes made under the previous government that a full public consultation wasn't required in 2021. However, that would actually be a breach of, without that particular law facilitating it, that would actually be a breach of Section 82 of the Local Government Act, which demands public consultation for all matters of significance, which this is. So my question is...
So what's your question?
Yes, so it would, the last decision was flawed as because...
Sorry, Rob, a point of order again. Relevance, where's the question?
Normal consultation for a significant item wasn't...
Perhaps I could suggest if you do have views on this, which you are entitled to, you save that for the discussion, which will come after.
Even for the discussion.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Te Manakura. I think I asked this question previously, but I couldn't see it in the report. Just to making absolutely sure, the suggestion was that it was going to cost $50,000 for the ratepayers to conduct the poll as part of the 2025 election. I think my question was, what would it cost the ratepayers if we undertook this representation review in the short space of time that we have left?
Through you, Madam Chair, we may not have that figure for you, and the reason for that, it was basically impossible for us to even scope out what that would look like, given the short space of time. So just a bit of context, representation reviews normally take months. They're months-long processes, and so it was really unfeasible, in our view, to map that out, try and define it, and then try and put a cost figure against that in the space of time we have available under the legislation. So I appreciate that we haven't necessarily provided that figure to you. The reason is it wasn't a feasible option at all in our view, and that's why we haven't been able to put a dollar figure against it.
Thank you for that. So just a subsequent question then, I guess. I know it would be crystal ball gazing, but based on what the last one cost, what do you think roughly it might cost? 3 times the price? 4 times? 5?
Sorry, we'll hit...
Thank you.
think it's
I
reasonable
understand.
to be able to answer that.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Oh, sorry, Councillor Waru.
Tēnā koe te manukura. Probably a question for our CE. It's along the $50,000 question too. I've just heard it's sort of an assumed number, so I'm just asking, actually, how did you get to that? Given if there's a referendum going to happen at the same time as voting, I can't understand how this would add a significant amount to the process.
Thank you.
Whakamara mai, please.
We'll just invite one of our staff members from governance to respond to that.
Thank you. Through the chair, we've received that information from our election service provider, elections.com, and that's their estimate to conduct a poll in conjunction with the 2025 election.
Thank you.
Okay, I still think you need to dive into those numbers a bit, but kia ora.
Councillor Wang.
Thank you, Your Worship. And thanks, Andrew, for the report, and welcome to Paul to his first meeting. Just my question is just around, I've noticed a slight theme with some of the other councils that have adopted, or I guess retained, their Māori wards, and where they have directed their CEs to look into what the implications would be if we were to look at not proceeding with a referendum. My question would just be, I guess, to our CE, is that from your perspective, I guess what the implications of that would be.
Thank you, Councillor Wang. Through you, Your Worship. I have actually spoken with a number of CEs who received that direction in the last couple of weeks. They have gotten subsequent legal advice, and look, in summary, the conclusion is chief executives have to comply with the law, and the law is that we do have to have a poll. So I appreciate that some councils have passed that resolution. Seeing what has happened in those councils, it hasn't changed anything, and the advice that I've received to date, and my advice to you, is that we have to comply with the law. There isn't a feasible option to not carry out a poll if we make the decision as recommended to retain Māori wards.
Thank you. Well, there appear to be no further questions. We have had a mover by Councillor Waru. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Maxwell. So we now open up for any discussion. Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This vote on the future of Rotorua's Māori wards is significant. And I signal now that I will be asking for a division so that our own community can know where we all stand on this issue. Here in the heart of Māoridom, I support the motions brought forward by the CEO. Thank you on that, especially number 2, and that is to retain the Māori wards that were put in place. I know it might be a big ask, but if we could join Palmerston North and many others who have unanimously supported this, that would be good. But sadly, I went down to the Marawata Hui meeting of all Māori councillors around the Motu last Monday down in Wellington at no cost to the Rotorua Lakes Council, but it was a very good hui, and up till that time there were about 14 or 15 councils that have voted on this. 2 councils, the rest 12 to 13 all supported this. Sadly, we don't want to be another Kaipara or this. That's why we'll be calling for a division for the vote so we know where we stand. The other one I listened to. Oh, what's happening?
Too powerful.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Rick. I'll put my haka voice on. Yeah. I just also, you answer to Councillor Fisher's question on if we don't comply, what will happen? I know we have to comply, but also many councils down there said they're going to test this, and many said they can't put us all in jail. We can't all go to jail. I do want to say something here also on Te Tātou o Te Arawa who represent our hapu and iwi. They've been a strong support to many of us with this issue. We all know that the whole debate on this is not fair. We all know that. Māori wards are historic. Now we're finding it's hysteric. That's what we want to try and avoid. But to my fellow colleagues, I hope we can join the majority in New Zealand that are saying, let's be unanimous on this and deal with other issues as they arise. I will be voting in favour of the retention of the Māori wards. Kia ora koutou katoa.
Are there any further speakers? Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Te Manakura. What a schmozzle the last representation review was. I sat in that chair and did my submission to council. I then appeared before the Parliamentary Select Committee and spoke to them. And during that period, many hundreds of other citizens had their kōrero. The whole thing cost the ratepayers an enormous amount of money because it went on for months and we still couldn't get it right, to the point where the Attorney General had to intervene and say, this isn't cool. And it ended up being determined by the local electoral commission that this model that we have today is the right model for Rotorua. As C. Moraes rightly pointed out, we're only into the first term of a 2-year term, The cost of us and the time that we have available to run another representation review, it's just the likelihood of another schmozzle is far too high. We do not have the resources to do it properly. We don't have the time to do it properly. I would strongly suggest that we vote in favour of taking this to the election in 2025 so that all of Rotorua can have their say on this issue. This is not something for us, I believe, to determine. This is something for the people of Rotorua to determine. We have plenty of time between now and then to have a frank debate in the community about this issue. Rather than rushing ahead and trying to do a representation review of our own before the election, I believe that could be costly and end up with something that we don't want in the, once again. So as Councillor Maxwell has rightly pointed out, I will be supporting retaining this.
Thank you. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Kiriopa.
Thank you, through the Chair. As I like to point out in council meetings, councils have obligations to Māori under its own Local Government Act 2002 to have processes specifically providing for Māori to contribute to decision making and to plan for how to support Māori capacity to contribute. Unfortunately, the so-called Te Aroha Partnership has never been any such thing, but that's another fight for the iwi to have. Māori wards are one way of supporting iwi engagement and decision making, and they go some way to acknowledging our rights as sovereign First Nations peoples, acknowledged by the Crown through the signing of both the Declaration of Independence and Te Tiriti o Waitangi, because they allow our whānau on the Māori roll to elect our own representatives. However, as has been made clear to the world in Gaza, Indigenous nations stand in the way of the continued desecration of Papatūānuku for economic gain. So here we are again, fighting for our rights as tangata whenua to have a voice in the decisions being made in our own lands. In all honesty, the likely cost to ratepayers of getting rid of Māori wards right now is probably the main reason I believe some of our councillors will vote to hold on to these seats until the next election. However, that still won't mean they're safe. Iwi and tangata tiriti will need to vote to keep them when the time comes. That's easier said than done for our whānau and hapu who do not engage in these colonial systems that have been imposed upon us. But as we know, the colonial construct of time has no bearing on the fight of our tūpuna passed on to us to restore the birthright of our tamariki and mokopuna to act as kaitiaki in these islands. Ka whawhai tonu mātou.
We've had 3 speakers in support. I now call if there is any speaker who wishes to speak against, and then I will hand over the final say to Councillor Waru if he wishes as the mover of the motion. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Your Worship. Firstly, I would like to acknowledge the Maori Ward councillors who are sitting at the table, and I want to say it's been a privilege and a pleasure to get to know you all this term. It's been, we've had some disagreements at the table, but we've maintained civility and pleasantness, and it's been good. I think the appropriate starting place for this debate is the declaration that we elected members made when we were inducted, that we would act in the best interests of the Rotorua district. And as I campaigned, that means not the best interests of Te Aroha, necessarily, not the best interests of Māori, necessarily, or even their perceived best interests, but the best interests of the Rotorua district. And it is a wider community that were not consulted in 2021, and they ought to have been, and that's what the government is intending to do with this legislative change, is to allow the wider community to be heard on this. And I, of course, acknowledge that Te Aroha is a significant part of the Rotorua district. And I acknowledge the consultation that happened in 2021. And Te Aroha said that they would like a Māori ward, please, and that's what happened. But life is complex, and sometimes we want things, and sometimes the way life works, we don't always get what we want. And that's certainly been true for all of us sitting around this table during this term. Sometimes, however, with the benefit of hindsight, we can look back And we can say, as Garth Brooks did when he wrote his song, "Thank God for Unanswered Prayer." Because sometimes, with the benefit of hindsight, it's best that we didn't get what we wanted. I'd like to quote from then Councillor Tapsell's speech in 2021, when she voted against adopting a Māori ward, because I think she makes some salient arguments. She said, "I respect that other councils need Māori wards, but Rotorua is unique. Because Māori have already been so successful at being elected into Rotorua Council, I'm concerned it's a backward step for Te Arawa. Restricting Māori voters to only being able to influence 3 seats instead of 10 is not progress and reduces their influence of who represents them on council. At this table today," she said, 4 Māori councillors from Te Arawa, and that's nothing new. Rotorua has a very long history of electing Māori to council. Well, let's have a look around the council table now, today, 2024, under the Māori wards, and count how many Māori are sitting at the table. I think you'll find there's 3 councillors, plus, of course, our mayor. Mayor Tapsell, then Councillor Tapsell, said the purpose of introducing Māori wards was to ensure fair representation, but that doesn't relate to Rotorua because we're unique, and I'm very grateful for that. Our rangatahi and our mokopuna know that being Māori is not a barrier to getting onto this council. In the past 12 years, the highest polling councillor has been Māori. While other councils absolutely need Māori wards to ensure that iwi are at the table, we're already at the table, and with a much better model than Māori wards. I think Councillor Tapsell made some persuasive arguments there, and I acknowledge Councillor Maxwell, who has been elected for now his 17th term under all sorts of representation models. As Winston Churchill once said, democracy is the worst form of government, except for all the others that have been tried from time to time. The introduction of wards is an attempt to tweak or improve democracy, but I don't think you'd have to be a brave man to argue against democracy in its purest form being the best that we've got, albeit terrible. For that reason, I shall be voting against adopting or staying with the Māori ward, and I think the most sensible way forward is to revert to the option of 10 at-large councillors as we had in 2019. That will save the cost and the expense of a representation review, and that will give everybody an opportunity to be heard for the next term as to how we go ahead when we have our representation arrangements review in the next term. I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Mayor Tapsell.
Thank you very much. I will exercise a right of reply as you have quoted me. I did vote against Māori wards due to pretty fair concerns about the restriction of Māori being able to vote from 10 down to 3. Today I will be very happy to be supporting retaining Māori wards because I think that it's important that there's been a decision of council. We've had our Māori ward councillors and they shouldn't be forcibly removed due to government. I believe in local decision making and I am happy to support retaining today. Now we have had 3 speakers for and 1 speaker against, so we will be putting this to the vote now. We have had a division called, which means apologies, we will go to you, Councillor Waru. And there has been a division called, which means when we do take the vote, we will need to ask everybody to raise their hands. But the final say will go to the mover of this motion, Councillor Waru.
Ka pai te kawa te arawa, la say. Just heard that we're unique. Oh, apologies, Robert, but just listening to that kōrero doesn't seem so. So you talk about our seats, our ward seats, and us not needing them in this community. The difference is, at that time, they weren't guaranteed. These 3 seats guarantee Māori participation. Guarantee. Should be a bit more, in my opinion, but hoi anō, tērā. And I heard kōrero about costs. You know, who's the biggest ratepayer here? I Rotorua. I'll just plant that there, hei whakaaro mā tātou. I heard kōrero about consultation. The consultation, yes, was carried out by Te Tatau o Te Arawa, our partner, but it wasn't restricted to just Te Arawa. Tūwhera ki te katoa, we had all sorts. We had Te Arawa there, we also had ngā iwi katoa te motu e noho mai ana ki a Te Arawa, all the other tribes that live amongst Te Arawa also attended. We also had tangata tiriti attend. So I think our consultation was far better than any that I've seen in other places, to be quite frank. The thing is, we talk about democracy, and it's not been this is not unusual or a different kōrero that any of you as councillors has heard from me. You know, democracy, kia hau, ko pakaru. It's broken. Why? Because the ture still, the law still cutting us out. And I say us, I mean te iwi Māori. And I remind us with the referendum, with the 5% threshold now that this government wants to bring back in. That's the only piece of legislation, to my knowledge, that actually singles out a particular people and gives them a threshold, gives others the say over them. So, anei taku aki aki ki a te arawa o tira ki te ao Māori katoa, and tangata tiriti the same. Please get registered, please get ready to vote, because this is only the first hump, the big one's coming, a te rātau. We have a year. So hopefully we can mobilise ourselves, get active, and do these things properly. I agree, kapai, consultation, but let's do it right. So, democracy aside, all I ask is that, come on, e te kaunihera, let's do what's right, because that's what it comes down to in the end. Nā reira, kia huri anō wakumihi kia tātou katoa, ko tā mai tēnei rā, tēnā tātou katoa. Of course, I'm voting and keeping our wards. Kia ora.
Kia ora, thank you. So we have had that moved by Councillor Waru, seconded by Councillor Maxwell. I now ask all those in favour, please raise your hand. Any against? Thank you very much. And for those in the audience, Councillor Barker supported this motion too. I'm pleased to say that that has been carried. Thank you very much. So I'll read out what we have just passed. That was to resolve to retain Te Ipu Waitaketake Māori Ward for the 2025 election. We note that this decision will require the holding of a binding poll on the question of Māori wards in conjunction with the 2025 triennial election. We note that the results of the poll will take effect for the 2028 and 2031 triennial elections. And we also note that while the matter is significant, the timeframe of the government's amendment does not allow meaningful community engagement to occur on this decision. Thank you very much for those who were present to support this vote. What we will do now is we will carry on with our council agenda, which is financial update, amendment to council standing orders, and then progress reports. If you do not wish to stay for the remainder of the council business, then you are very welcome to head off whenever you wish. But we once again thank members of the public for being here, and also to those who live streamed. Ngā mihi nui kia koutou katoa. short break while members of the public decided to head off. So we will continue with the business of our agenda. We are on page 41 of our agenda now. We are on our financial update. May I please have a mover and a seconder to receive the financial update June 2024. That's moved by Councillor O'Brien, seconded by Councillor Kai Fong. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Thank you. And I now invite Thomas and also David to overview their report.
Good morning, Your Worship and elected members. This report covers the draft unaudited financial results as at the end of June. We do have Audit New Zealand on site from the 9th of September to go through and begin the year-end audit process, so these numbers are draft and unaudited at this point. Overall, at the end of June, we are looking at a draft surplus of 16.3 million. It's marginally lower than what we had in our annual plan, and I'll go through some of the reasons behind that in this presentation. If we look at our overall revenue, the biggest change from last month is around our capital subsidies. So each month when we've been reporting on our capital subsidies, we've been behind just due to the achievement of some milestones in our capital projects. What we've done as part of the year-end process is we have been able to test some of those milestones, and some cash that we have received that's been sitting on our balance sheet as revenue in advance is now able to be classed as revenue in the P&L. So you'll see that capital subsidies are now nearly 7 million ahead of budget, and that's mainly in the CIP stormwater projects, the museum now that that's underway, and some revenue around the aquatic centre with some milestones there. User fee revenue is still behind budget, and that's with the usual suspects with the Sir Howard Morrison Centre, the EEC, and with parking, and that's offset by higher investment income and some of those operational subsidies. Expenditure is 21.8 million ahead of budget as well. Within that number there's about 15 million of non-cash adjustments with our assets. So as part of the year-end process, we are going through a revaluation on a number of our asset classes, and as part of that, we need to look at the assets we have and whether any of those assets are still on our books but no longer operational, and some of those tidy-ups occur through the year-end process. And we also have interest expense ahead of year-to-date budget, or full-year budget, through as a result of the loans from MFE and some CIP money that is arriving later than we had budgeted. Our full-year capital program ended up at 117.6 million, again the highest we've ever achieved as a council, but behind our full-year budget of 135.9 million. And our net debt at the end of June was 412 million. That's around 10 million higher than we had budgeted in our annual plan. That's tied to that MFE loan and the CIP money that has arrived after balance date, offset by some capital expenditure that we didn't achieve that was funded through loans. So breaking down where we have ended up at the end of June, so capital subsidies showing higher just due to the recognition of that revenue. Similar thing with development contribution revenue. So when we receive money from development contributions, there's a bit of a test that has to occur with whether or not that project has started. So once we receive that cash, we need to test whether test at year end whether those projects have started. If they haven't started, they move out of revenue and into our balance sheet until such time as those projects do start. So you'll see there that DC revenue is showing behind budget. Some of that money has been received in cash, but it is sitting on our balance sheet and revenue in advance until such time as a number of those projects do start, and our liability to refund developers if those projects don't happen is extinguished. There's also, as I mentioned before, $15 million of non-cash assets expenses within that result as well. looking at our year-end draft unaudited profit and loss statement, just breaking out there the income being 18.2 million ahead of year-to-date budget. You'll see there fees and charges remain behind. As I mentioned before, we do have $12 million of vested assets, which we did mention last month around assets that have been created by developers and given to council to manage on an ongoing basis as counted as revenue. Within expenses, you'll see there the operating expenses are $5.7 million ahead of budget. There's some, as we've covered through previous months, the lion's share of that is due to contractual obligations with our wastewater and the waste management activities that have those CPI clauses built into what we're contractually obliged to pay for the delivery of those services. And within that result is also a large number of expenditure we've made on the roading network, which is offset by some operational NZTA Wakakatahi subsidies. And lastly, just covering our capital program for the full year, that 117.6 million, you'll see there the lion's share of that has occurred within our sewerage and sewage activities. So the likes of the wastewater treatment plant, Tarawera, and the Rotorua scheme within that number. You'll see there a significant amount of investment in our community wellbeing. So within that number is the commencement of the museum, the aquatic centre, and investment in our community wellbeing activity. And also a large investment within our roading and our stormwater activities as well. So I'm happy to take questions on the report or the presentation, if you have any.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, David, thanks for the report. Can you expand a little bit on this loss on asset disposals? I think what I'm hearing is that it was writing off or depreciating stuff that's no longer of use, so it wasn't actually disposed of. Why would you not offset that with depreciation?
It's so there's a number of processes that happen before we do a series of tests on all assets we have. And we will see whether or not we may have some assets that are on our books with a remaining useful life that things have been replaced more quickly than we had envisaged. That is the technical treatment that it goes through that loss on sale. If we look at if I take the example there of the stormwater activity. So within that $15 million loss on sale is about $1 million worth of stormwater assets that we have recognised as no longer being in use. However, when we come to show the annual report numbers, below the line, so below the numbers we've shown before, will be a gain of about 16 million. So it's a tidy up essentially of our asset information. So for stormwater, there'll be $1 million of assets that we had that we've recognised are no longer in action, but there's also below the line $16 million worth of revalued assets that are bringing our overall assets up to where they need to be.
Okay, just a subsequent. I guess that's the protesters. Around budgeting then, is this something that you do annually and would you not budget a line for this?
We make an allowance in the budgeting for the revaluation gain based on inflation expectations. When it comes to the loss on sale, we don't necessarily budget for that because we firstly it's a non-cash and any kind of basis we'd make for the budget would be difficult to justify. It's a very difficult judgment call to make through the budgeting around what may or may not happen throughout the financial year with our assets.
Okay. Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, David.
Thank you very much for your question. Are there any further questions? Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Te Mana Kura. Thank you for the opportunity to be able to ask a question. Thank you both very much for your comprehensive report. Just to follow on from Councillor Brown's question, could I just ask, in regards to the disposal that David spoke about, how does that compare with previous years? Are we roughly in the same ballpark, or are we, was this particular year perhaps because of wastewater treatment plant advanced?
The number for this year is a little higher than previous years, but it's mainly due to the assets that we are revaluing. So just as a reminder, out of all the different classes of assets we have, we need to revalue everything within a 3-year program, essentially. So in a year where we investigate and reval an asset class that's low value, there may be probably a lower value of adjustments. And in a year where we are doing significant revaluations on our roading network, on our stormwater activity, on our wastewater activity, the likelihood of changes may be a little higher.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Waru.
Thank you for the report. I'm not too sure if you'd be able to answer it, but I'm going to ask anyway. Given the direction that, that the government gave us pretty straightforward last week around the well-being aspect of the mahi we do in council, how do you envisage us moving forward with what we've allocated as budget for well-being? Where do you see that going? And if you don't have an answer, I'll understand.
I'll probably just have to refer you back to the LTP discussions and forums and deliberations that we had, where we obviously focused around those priority 1, 2 and 3 projects, where I guess a lot of that well-being items that you'd probably be describing fell into priority 3 and 2, and obviously the council's priority and focus was on our core infrastructure and ensuring that our infrastructure was invested in, renew and grow. And saying that as well, we do have some community amenity and wellbeing aspects with regards to continual investment in the aquatic centre and sports fields, but you know, it is our budgets for this year, and in particular for the next 3 years with regards to our LTP, are heavily focused and invested into ensuring our infrastructure is well looked after and invested into.
So it's your opinion we're already pretty well set?
I'd say we're fairly, the LTP is fairly aligned to those expectations, yeah.
Thank you. And one more question. It's given the kōrero that we were given this morning with respect to our public forum around the fines and the revenue we make from that. Where are we currently sitting in terms of the revenue made from fines, if you're able to answer?
So that does fit in the fees and charges discussion that we've had. The one where I guess we are behind has been that continual challenge around parking and those and infringements and those sorts of aspects. So there is a challenge there, but I think with the exception of, I think there was and I think JP in the future has talked about the dog registration challenges that we've had in the last 12 months. The majority of the others are fairly in line with expectations.
Thank you. Be happy to follow that up a bit more later on too. Kia ora.
Thank you. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Te Manakura. Just while carrying on from Councillor Waru's question, while much of Prime Minister Luxon's speech did resonate with me, there was one that stood out that I was a little bit concerned about, which was revenue capping. If we only get revenue, this council doesn't get much more revenue other than rates, fees and charges. What form of revenue capping would he be implying?
Through your worship, I might try and respond to that. So I was in the room, and what I heard was revenue capping for non-core services. So I believe the understanding was whether revenue could be capped on things that are not part of the core services of council, and the Prime Minister expressed a view on what some of those might be. So you'll come to a discussion in due course around, for example, local water done well, about how the revenue generated for our water activity needs to support the expenses of our water activity. I believe there's, if you extend that to say revenue generated for other aspects of core council services supports the expense of core council services, That's the conversation I understand about revenue capping for non-core services.
Thank you for clarifying that. So you don't see any real threat to what we have at the moment?
I guess I'd bring us back to the long-term plan again and the rates adoption. And while we talked about an average increase of 11.4, you might recall the graphs and the information that we showed you, where actually a big portion of that is within our targeted rates in water, sewerage, which are actually much higher than that. So we're actually our targeted rates that were supporting our core Three Waters infrastructure was responding to the costs of that. And that was being offset by the fact that our general rate was, I think, down at about 7%. And so that was pulling the average back down. So if anything, I would say that our LTP, and particularly the year one increase, was actually sort of in line with that because it actually suppressed the general rate increase, which was helping to offset that targeted rate increase, which was wholly focused on investment into our infrastructure.
Thank you.
Councillor Kofon.
Thank you, Chair. Just checking we're all okay on target for audit and everything's all in place and going well?
Yep, the interim audit was completed on time and on budget, and had some good positive feedback on that. And the team are progressing towards the end of this week with audit expected to be on site. There'll be some normal challenges around discussions that we have, and particularly around the big topics at the moment are around revaluation of assets, in particular around some of our classes, and I'm sure we'll have some good dialogue with our auditors and our valuers on working towards that. But at this moment, all progressing as expected.
Okay, thank you. Second question, Chair, through you. Just reading the report, we've obviously got a lot of challenges because our rates revenue is tracking below budget, our fees and charges are under budget, we've got higher operating expenses, our interest expense, and we've got a good result. And thank you for the team for that we actually have ended up the year where we wanted to be, so in a good space. But I think where I'm going with this is we're moving through hopefully a lower inflation environment, hopefully a lower cost of debt servicing. So are there some strategies or some things that we could do around timing for our CapEx projects so that when we come to look at these activities and I know you're talking about LTP, but for the annual plan, that we are going to be at least within that sort of target rates number, or if there's an option to somehow do something to bring it back down. Sorry, there was a lot of question on that.
Oh no, it's I guess the result that we're talking about now was 2 months ago, and we're now 2 months into the new financial year, and so some of those inflationary pressures that we've faced in the past, and particularly when, as David highlighted, there's two activities that draw a big portion of that because of contractual obligations. Those sorts of contractual resets will take place after Christmas, and we'll see as to how close we've got with regards to our estimates and the impacts on our budgets. I think if you look at this year ahead of us, we will have still some challenges around some of our fees and charges, and particularly around our venues with regards to what's currently happening in New Zealand, and where some of our neighbours have opened new competitive aspects of that. But also we've actually taken some actions as well with regards to trying to offset some of those challenges. So I think David has talked about in the past around that pre-funding of that $24 million. So that is actually contributing a net benefit to council of $280,000 over the life of that pre-funding. And recently what we've done, particularly around our debt and our treasury management, when rates were probably incredibly at the low end, we spread our debt portfolio over a longer period in a 10-year window. And over the last couple of years, with regards to as rates have gone up, we've compressed and shortened it, but we've also put a lot more on floating rather than fixing. And by putting it on floating, we can actually respond to where the market is heading. And just recently, last week, we did move 60 million of floating onto effectively fixing it by engaging in swaps. And we effectively moved 40 million from next month, and then another 20 million which will kick in forward starting, moving it from about 5.75 to 3.5% by entering into swaps. So that will instantly give us an annual relief of, I think, of close to $600,000 to $700,000 a year. So we are actually active in that space with regards to treasury management. With regards to the timing of capital works and those sorts of things, it's a hard one because there's a long lead time. Just remembering the bulk of our, big portion of our capital works is renewal work, and so that is funded from rates revenue. So the timing of that shouldn't affect our treasury, whereas what is driving our borrowing this year are particularly two significant projects: the wastewater treatment plant, which is well underway and progressing, the museum as well, which is well underway and progressing, and also the IAF with regards to that sort of investment. And so two of those are well underway, and one is still in that feasibility staging section, so it's a little bit hard to manage that. So instead what we do is we manage that cost of borrowing by being very proactive and driving down our borrowing costs for our treasury management practices. Hope that helped answer the question.
Thank you, Thomas. He said it was a comprehensive answer.
Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. Top of page 45, gentlemen, there's the second half of a sentence says, cost escalation within our parks, wastewater and waste management contracts, brackets, 3.7 million higher than year-to-date budget. Parks, wastewater and waste management seem like odd bedfellows. Are we able to have a breakdown of those individually?
Yes, we can do that. Those are I guess the main activities that have large contracts that provide our service delivery. So we're just responding to those. So they are an eclectic group because, yes, those are the main activities that we have in council that are provided, services are provided through contracts.
Okay, so that's an action point, is it? Do you circulate the breakdown?
I'm not sure that's necessary. I'll just get the Chief Executive to further respond to your question.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. And I might just take this opportunity to also emphasise the impact that the in-housing of Infracore is going to have on the OPEX and some of the costs that you see here. Obviously, we're going to be working within the envelope that Council have approved for year one of the long-term plan, and that's going to involve some trade-offs as we further unpick the costs of delivering those services to the community. So what I can say is expect to see a more granular breakdown. Some of the breakdown that you're seeing here is a function of the way contracts are packaged rather than the way we'd like to report them because of how they're packaged with external providers. Going forward, as we unpick some of that, you will see more granularity. Can I just ask for patience from elected members as we work through the integration with Infracore? We're working at pace at the moment to work through the significant number of issues, and Thomas is going to have his hands full with that work over the next 8 to 12 months.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Waru, followed by Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you for your indulgence. Just a quick question. Maybe it's for our CEO. Given some of the korero and things that we experienced last week, the needs and the nice to haves, there was kind of a theme. What is your opinion, I suppose, about? Do you think that will affect any of our current projects moving forward?
Through your worship, project-wise, I don't believe so, because our projects are predominantly heavily core infrastructure based. The notable exception is the museum, which has significant funding from external sources. Look, and I think, to be clear, one of the other aspects of the Prime Minister's comments was focusing on delivery, which I believe we are very, very focused on. The museum, for example, is at a stage where the only option is to deliver it and deliver it well. There aren't any other significant decisions to be made. So we're really in action mode. Some of the other projects are large infrastructure projects. There still are decisions to come up ahead, and we will be bringing those to you. But again, when, the example of fantasy projects, other thing that was brought up, I don't think that resonates much with the work program that this council has adopted through the long-term plan.
Thank you. Now, the reason I asked is just to outline that I think we're on a good track, and I take confidence from Thomas's kōrero around our LTP stuff as well. So, ka pai, I just wanted to make sure we weren't going to get our money taken off us for doing the museum. So, koina noa, kia ora.
Yeah, thank you, and there is no risk of that. Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you to Manakura, and thank you, and I acknowledge your leniency and allow me to speak again, so thank you for that. Gentlemen, just a question around the development and financial contributions, but I'm happy if others want to chime in as well. I see we've missed significantly close to half of the budget. I appreciate what comes in as development fees, goes out as growth comes in, and we've talked about growth paying for growth, but could I ask in the wider context, is there a concern that if we haven't made budget this year and we put in a very substantial increase to developers, which most of you voted for, how confident are we that if we can't achieve budget on the current fees, that you're going to achieve it on higher fees and substantially higher?
So my apologies for the comprehensive answer that's about to come.
No, it's fine.
No, so I'll just bring you back to probably David's presentation where he did cover that off. So if you recall, and you probably don't, but if you look in your packs around the May result, we were very close to budget, if not over budget, with regards to our development contributions. And what we've done here is presented to you a draft annual report as close to possible as what you expect to receive post the audit. And the only adjustment we really expect to see is some of those valuation gains which will come in below the line. And in preparing that, what we've done is we've had to evaluate the DC revenues that we've received. So in May, we were very much on budget, and we've had to move that from revenue and put it onto our balance sheet because we couldn't recognise it as revenue at the time. Now, that's not to say that we haven't received the development contributions that we plan to. We have, but because we haven't done some of that work, we haven't been able to recognise it as revenue, and that's what you're seeing now. And so, yes, it does look like we haven't achieved budget, but with regards to underlying growth and the development revenue, DC revenues we've received, we have. It's just from an accounting perspective, we've had to take a portion of that, quite large portion, and move it from revenue to our balance sheet because we're not able to recognise it as revenue yet until some of the underlying capital works have been done, and because they haven't been done yet, we haven't been able to recognise it. I hope that makes sense. Even though it looks in the P&L that we're well behind budget, technically we're actually not. We're pretty much bang on where we were, but for accounting purposes we can't recognise a portion of that.
Thank you. So you're confident that with the large increase that we approved in the LTP, that will be able to cover the growth that we anticipate from the projects that we're aware of?
Look, it matches the growth that's in the LTP. What I obviously can't have confidence in is the world economy and what developers do or don't do, and whether growth occurs. But what we have seen in the last 12 months of what you've seen is that the growth we anticipated took place, and the revenue from DCs were fairly in line with our expectations. At this stage, we anticipate the same will occur going forward.
Thank you. And finally, to Manakura, could I just mention, so we've had questions from Councillor Kai Fong, one of the committee chairs, to our team about tightening our belts. And while I totally support that, I think it's also incumbent not just on staff, but also our leadership team, including our chairs, because how many people did we send to LG&Z? Was it 6, 7 or 8 people?
Point of order, Councillor. We sent exactly the amount that the
I just hope that committee members and committee leaders remember that it's not just incumbent on staff. It probably helps if we lead by example. So I hope that that's something that staff, our people also around this table think about. Thank you.
Councillor O'Brien, those comments were entirely unnecessary. And if Rotorua want us to continue to represent Rotorua at these forums where Prime Ministers and important ministers turn up, make announcements, and we get to have discussions with them, it's incredibly important. So at the conference, the Deputy and myself were also voting on the remits. as you, our council, had requested us to, which are very important strategic moves on how local government New Zealand is advocated for and represents not only Rotorua, but local government in general, which means our local communities. So you may have a personal issue at that, but I just want to state that that work is incredibly important for us to continue to maintain not only our advocacy and our roles of influence, but also the best possible outcomes for our community at a time where it was very well publicised how important these discussions were happening at LGNZ, when Prime Ministers and Ministers are not understanding the value of councils and how much we do invest into our communities. So we take your personal comments on board, but I do also want to
point taken, though, Your Worship, but it was also in replying to comments from Deputy Mayor Kai Fong. So I'm totally in favour of what she's saying. I just think that sometimes actions speak louder than words. And can I also remind that future this afternoon, or sorry, later this morning, we're discussing about the importance of quorums and representations by video. So again, actions speak louder than words. Thank you.
I think your words are speaking a bit too loud today. Councillor Kai Fong, did you wish to have a right of reply?
I wasn't. So as Councillor O'Brien is well aware, that was a decision that was made by Council in accordance with our Council policy, and it was Council that decided, the representatives that attended the LGNZ conference. I think that he's also aware that any decisions are not just made by myself as Chair, and I don't have that influence. If he thinks like he does, well, I think you're sadly mistaken, but it is Council that makes decisions around funding and spending.
Thank you. I did have one final question. It's just regarding vested assets. So I do note that we've, as you mentioned, brought on board $12,100,000 worth of vested assets. Just to clarify, is this in lieu of development contributions? Because I know that there have already been questions, and I've raised this before in the past as well, that we're not getting as many development contributions, but when you get $12 million extra invested assets from developers in lieu of that, it seems like that's a great thing, but I'm actually not too sure if it is, because of course it's assets that turn into liabilities for us when we have to continue to maintain them. I'm not quite sure what all of those vested assets are, whether they're roads, reserves.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. It's a range, and so it's not the same assets that are covered by development contributions, because that's infrastructure that we put in. A good way of an example of what that sort of stuff covers is someone does a subdivision, the developer builds the roads and the footpaths, the developer also puts the wastewater infrastructure and the water infrastructure into that development, and then connects it to the boundary with regards to the council services. All those assets are vested into council. So the developer does cover the cost and obviously recovers that cost when they sell sections and do those sorts of aspects, and then those assets get vested in council. That's probably the simplest example I could give of what's normally covered in that sort of element. But it could also be a reserve as part of that contribution of a subdivision as well. Yep.
Thank you. And just to clarify, is that an option for them instead of making a development contribution, a financial development contribution, because then that might impact our revenue?
Yeah, I think as David's saying, it can at times be for specific items, but if a development drives growth and it triggers a need for council to do investment into infrastructure that it is targeted in our infrastructure strategy and LTP, then development contributions are liable, yes.
Thank you. There appear to be no further questions. We don't need to do a vote on that, but we'll just check with the council. Our next item is, thank you very much, Thomas and David. Our next item is the amendment to council standing orders. Would you like to take a brief break now or just carry on?
Take a break.
Okay. I ask for a mover and a seconder that the report amendment to council standing orders 2022 be received. That is moved by Councillor Kiriopa, seconded by Councillor Wang. All those in favour to receive this report, please say aye. Aye. Thank you. And I'd like to invite Rick Dunn to overview this report. Thank you.
Kia ora koutou, and thank you, and through the Chair. I will take the report as read, but I just want to highlight the reason it is in front of you. Our legislation has changed, and it's changed to include the opportunity, well, not the opportunity, to the elected members that are coming on to the meeting or attending a meeting on audio-visual link have the opportunity or make up the quorum. Okay, so they make up the quorum. That's a decision that you make, that the legislation has given you that option, and also that they are able to vote on audio-visual link. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Rick. I think this would be a welcome change for some. We'll open up for questions and then discussion. Councillor Waru, followed by Councillor Lee.
No, wait, tomorrow, just a quick question. Kia ora, Rick. Haven't seen you there for a while, so good to see you. It seems to me the only difference here is really just being part of the quorum. Everything else stays as is that correct?
Yeah, and thank you.
I meant those who are coming on audio-visual link.
Yeah, thank you, correct. And a little bit of background. During the COVID pandemic, and more recently the Gabrielle and Auckland storms, there's been interim opportunity for elected members to be part of the quorum while zooming in. Legislation has now been updated and came into force will come into force on 1 October.
Thank you. Well, I guess, this is the legislation, so we're supporting, so I support it. However, I do want to encourage my fellow councillors that maybe we make kanohi ki te kanohi priority, and then this comes afterwards. Don't get me wrong, I've really leaned on this in the past few years, so it's tautoko, kia ora.
Thank you, and I agree with face-to-face in person should be the priority. We'll go Councillor Lee Wang and then Kai Fong.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you, Rick. Thank you for your report. It sets out the proper process for modifying the standing orders, which is good. My concern is that at a previous, perhaps the most recent council meeting, we effectively changed the standing orders in relation to public forums. We have seemed to have adopted a practice where the public are required to give 5 days' notice instead of the 2 days that are provided for in the standing orders. The public have other limitations as well. Now, shouldn't we follow this approach to adopt those changes to standing orders in the same way?
Thank you. Through the Chair, there was always a provision to have public forums in the standing orders. What I'm presenting to you today is around the change in legislation on quorums by audio-visual and voting through audio-visual.
Yes, I understand that. Loud and clear, understood, and I support what's in your report. So it's really a process issue.
I might just ask the Chief Executive to respond to your...
Sure.
Which it is outside of this current standing order, but we'll ask.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I guess that was going to be my point, that this topic here doesn't cover what you're talking about, but maybe we can have a discussion around any suggested modifications to the standing orders from what we're currently using to operate public forums, because I'm just aware that's not part of this item.
Oh, I'm not sure if you misunderstood me. The decision that we made at the last council meeting pertaining to standing orders didn't follow this process, and yet effectively modified the standing orders in relation to public forums. So I'm suggesting that if we want to deal with public forums in a manner which is different to what is in the standing orders that we all adopted at the start of this term, then we should be expecting a similar report in relation to public forums and a similar decision to be made by the elected members.
We'll take that on board as feedback. It's my understanding that any time we can choose to adopt or change standing orders as well as code of conducts. So we'll take that on board with feedback for the public limit for the public forums. But just a reminder, the how to put this, requests must be made to do a public forum at least 1 day prior. anything else can be waived by the chair. I heard you mention 5 days. So perhaps we'll have a discussion after this, but just if there were to be any further changes, we can bring that to a future meeting.
Yeah, the public forums are also excluded from the committees of council, which the standing orders don't provide for. So there's 2 examples there of the standing orders being effectively changed, but not through this process.
Thank you. So we'll go back to the item before us, because we do have questions from Councillor Wang and then Councillor Kaifong. Councillor Wang.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Rick, for the report. My question was just, I guess, kind of following on from Councillor Waru's points there of a preference to follow, a preference for kanohi ki te kanohi, face-to-face meetings. The legislation mentions both audio link and audio visual link to be counted as present for the purposes of a quorum. My question is just around for our council's standing orders. Right now, point 3, it's members who attend meetings by audio link or audio visual link will be counted as present for the purposes of a quorum. Is it possible that we only count those attending via audio visual link to be counted as present for the purposes of a quorum? Just because if it is just audio and we can't see them, are they really there?
And thank you for that question. I think the responsibility a council has is to make or provide communication links and equipment so councils can join meetings if they are unable to come in person. So there may be a technical issue that doesn't allow visual, so it may be prudent to leave that in there.
Thank you. Does that cover?
Sorry, yes. Thank you for that point as well. I understand the flexibility of things. However, if currently they are not counted as part of a quorum, I guess looking around the table around how what the appetite would be if we were to move an amendment to if I were to move an amendment just to remove the audio link and just for the audio visual link. And I understand the need to, the flexibility, but I think for council meetings especially, the need for an audio visual link to be able to see the member attending in person, knowing that they're there, and also knowing, especially when we're in confidential, that there are no other members in the room with the elected member.
Thank you. I think that's a fair point that you've raised. So what I'll do is we'll just pin that point. I'll finish off the questions, and then when we get to discussion, we'll see if that's agreeable with everyone, and you can move it with that slight wording change. Councillor Kaifong, followed by Councillor Waru.
Thank you, Chair. So my question also follows on from Councillor Lee, which was also a question that I'd raised when we were talking about the public forums, and at the time I was proposing an amendment to the standing orders, and at the time the staff advice was that the suggestions which actually Council voted on, and it was supported, so those sort of amendments in the way in which we dealt with public forums were put into practice, if we call it that. And so my question is also just around this standing order, which was effectively probably pre-COVID. We didn't have many people on audio-visual or on a TV screen. Can we have some other guidelines? And this goes to Councillor Wang's question. If you are on video link, that you leave your camera on if you can, because I think that's where the differentiation is between audio link and audio visual, because if your Wi-Fi is really bad, your camera may not work. So I'm just questioning that. Sorry, it's not really a question. And the second point goes back to just how do we put these protocols in place amongst ourselves as to how we act as councillors in terms of letting the chair know that you will be attending by way of a Zoom or an audiovisual link, and also that we don't just use it because it's convenient for us to sit at home, that we actually only use an audiovisual link if it's urgent, you're ill, maybe you've got leave, but that you do have the leave of the chair of that meeting. So just wanting to know how we can perhaps put some practices and protocols around how we would use an audiovisual link, because I'd hate to see a chair sitting in here with 10 people on Zoom.
Point of order.
What's your point of order?
Misrepresentation and right of reply to Councillor Kaifong. She claimed that we had made a decision at the last council meeting in relation to the public forum. As I recall, we made a decision to adopt public forums, and the advice from staff was that the Deputy Mayor and Una were going to fiddle with the standing orders as they pleased, but that decision was never actually ratified.
Point of order.
So there's
a point of order, sorry. Is it on
I object to the word fiddle with, and that was not the decision that was taken at the council meeting.
Do you wish to finish your point of order?
Yes. We never made a decision at this table that we would have 5 working days notice, for example. We never made a decision at this table, I believe. So I think that was just the wink and the nod that was granted to those people to change the standing orders as they pleased.
No, I don't think that's what's happening at all, Councillor. You have already mentioned your view on this at this meeting. I think what we'll do is ask the Chief Executive to have a discussion with you after. You have mentioned the 5 working days. I have highlighted that within our standing orders it's 1 working day, and the chairperson always has the ability to waive that anyway. But what we will do is we're going to come back and we're going to focus on the recommendation that's before us. And so I did have one, sorry, Councillor Kaifong, were you finished your? We do have one further question from Councillor, and then Councillor Waru, then Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you for your indulgence, Te Mare Kura, and thank you for bringing us back on the kaupapa. My thing is now, this brings to mind a need to upgrade our technologies to be able to cater for these types of things. Is there any thinking around how we go about doing this? Kia ora.
I'll ask our Chief Executive to respond.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I'm mindful of the Prime Minister's comments. I'm just keen to make sure that any investment we make is part of our core business. So I'll be working through what
it becomes a need now.
We've got it part of our budgets in the long-term plan, and see if there's room in there, because I do agree that in order to facilitate good participation from those online, we do need an upgrade of technology. Thank you.
I think you'll take that on board. And final question from Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Te Mandakura. Thank you for your report. Could I just ask, how many meetings, if any, have we actually been unable to carry out due to a lack of quorum during our term?
Thank you for the question. Exactly not sure, but very few.
Right. From the best of my recollection, I don't think any meeting, we've come close a couple of times. I think I had to come in from hospital last year just to make sure that we had one. But from my recollection, Madam Chair, I don't think we've missed either a committee meeting or a full council meeting during our triennium. But happy to be corrected if that's correct.
Yeah, that's correct. That's my recollection as well. In previous councils, unfortunately, that has been the case, though.
Thank you. Would you be able to, what would be the frequency, one per the last term?
Incredibly rare. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we do obviously do things like ask councillors, I ask councillors at the start of the term on any leave that they anticipate on taking, so we can make sure that we are timing it appropriately. So we did have a central mover by Councillor Wang. Did you wish to move that? And we can remove the words by audio link, so it just goes meetings by audio visual link. And then I'll ask if there's a seconder, and then we can open up for discussion. That's seconded by Councillor Brown. So we'll open it up, now that we have a mover and a seconder, we can open it up for discussion.
Sorry, Madam Chair, talk about the proposed amendment. For
Because
discussion.
he has chosen to move it with that addition, it's just the recommendation as it is.
As it is.
As it is, yeah.
Okay.
And Councillor Wang's reasoning was, I think, made quite clear from him. So we open up for discussion now, if there are any. Councillor Maxwell, followed by Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I support the recommendations here 2, 3 and 4 as it is, actually. But if there's an amendment later, then I can speak to it again maybe. But to me, I think this is bringing us up into the modern world. I think it's great whether it's the audio link, the audio visual, and also for the quorum. But I think the other important part is members attending can vote on that, which is also important. I mean, I appreciated Councillor Barker's vote this morning, being present. Kia ora. But I think as it is what I'd be supporting. It's been actually quite enlightening for us. I'd like to see, I heard you touch on a little bit of an upgrade. I think having been on Zoom from Nelson and everything, you don't see all the councillors. You also don't see who the presenters are. You can't tell who's talking sometimes. But just little things like that, maybe we've got some skilled people to upgrade that. But I think the motions that are, the recommendations that are here, I wholeheartedly support. Kia ora.
Kia ora, thank you. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I'd like to thank Councillor Wang for raising a very sensible and valid concern. I think there's perhaps a better way to solve the real concern that he raises, and that's the issue of ensuring that we all turn up here in person when we can. And but I think there were also legitimate concerns about, depending on where the person is, he may have an internet connection problem and it may only be viable to use audio. I think that's the reality of how the internet works in this day and age. I would like to signal a different amendment if this amendment were to fail. And my amendment would be to leave the wording as it is for item 3, and there would be the additional words that with the permission or leave of the chair. So if somebody wants to attend from elsewhere, and whether or not they want to have an audio-only link, or if that becomes necessary during the course of the meeting, such a person can request of the chair that on this occasion I can only attend the meeting via audio. Then the chair can grant that for this particular occasion.
Okay, thank you very much for that suggestion, Councillor Lee. And just to check, that was for point 2? Oh, sorry, 3. Was it point 3?
Madam Chair, I'm happy to just have that include.
Yes, and as a seconder, will you be happy? So the words are with permission or leave of the chair. And what point would you?
You can choose which you want, permission or leave. They mean the same thing. One's a more technical legal term, but
I believe we usually use the word leave elsewhere, but
yeah,
it doesn't really matter.
That's fine.
That's okay. Thank you. We'll just seek some advice from our staff member, Rick.
Thank you, and through the chair, some good recommendations here, but you may want to take into consideration as well Standing Orders 1310, which is chair's duties, Standing Orders 1311, which are conditions, and Standing Orders 1312, which is a request to attend, and the request to attend is directed to the chair and the CE, and where possible ask 2 days before the event, and then it's up to the CE and the chair to make audio-visual links available for that to happen.
Thank you very much for that advice. I think it won't do any harm to make it clear in the recommendation that that's possible. Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to clarify, because I can't actually see the motion on my screen. It's I can only see it through the link to the room. Is it possible just to share that to the screen so I can see it, please? Thank you.
Thank you. Just give us one moment.
Thank you. That's great. Thank you.
So we are still open for discussion. Was there any further discussion? Councillor O'Brien and then Councillor Waru.
Thank you, Te Matakura. Listening to the cases put forward as well as the motion, while I appreciate the need, say, for example, if one has a sick family member or an emergency, I'm actually against this and won't be supporting it. We're all volunteers at the end of the day. No one forced us to take these positions. We all put up our hands at elections. It's very clear when meeting times are held. You've been very good in letting us know the date straight away. I won't be supporting this or any of the amendments. I think it's very important for the members of the public to see us attending here. Not only that, but if people after the meetings or before want to approach us about items on the agenda, I think that's very important. I think it's very important to hear feedback from your constituents here and be seen to be here. I think there's nothing worse than watching Parliament, any Parliament around the world, where you watch them, if it's Congress or our one or Australia, and there's virtually one person talking to an entire empty room. And you think to yourself, what a waste of time. So sorry, for me, I appreciate, again, family sickness, etc. like that, but I think that when, say, the annual reports, if it's something that you can defend, the public are very reasonable and will forgive, say, an emergency, medical condition, family event, etc. like that. But generally, their expectation is to see us here, representing them, listening to the arguments and the points put forward. So for me, I'm sorry, I'll be voting against. But I do thank my colleagues for the very sound and some of the suggestions. Thank you.
Thank you for your perspective on that, Councillor O'Brien. Councillor Waru, and then we'll go finally Councillor Brown.
Tēnā koe ana, e te manukura. You might be able to steer me straight here. So I actually want to tautoko the original. I think the standing orders already covers, as has already been expressed, the requirement, or just good manners really, to let your chair know what's happening. I think the audio, visual, audio link, I think that's just wordsmithing. This audio, there's visual. Either way, as long as they're communicating and able to function and still contribute the way that is expected. But I also want to mention, and just to talk to Councillor O'Brien's point around the, kanohi ki te kanohi, really, that's what he's talking about. I think we're all clear around here that is the preference, and I think that is also our community's preference too, that we front up Atirana, a kanohi. So I'd like to keep it as it is, actually, so I'm not too sure if I've jumped the gun here or are we just debating this one at the moment.
The mover and seconder are comfortable based on the discussion that what we have above, but I will note that it still currently has audio link in it, and the only addition is with the permission of the chair.
Okay, then I get that. I just think it's getting a bit more complicated than it needs to be. Kia ora.
Thank you. Thank you for your thoughts on that. We'll go Councillor Brown, and then we will finish with the mover, Councillor Wang.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just picking up on Councillor O'Brien's view, I get exactly what you're saying, but I think there may be times in an emergency, perhaps, where we need to make or pull a quorum together because we are, for whatever reason, unable to get to the table. So I think this is a prudent amendment to the standing orders to reduce risk to the decision-making process. Having said that, I do take on board that, person being here in person is the preference. Kia ora.
Thank you. And finally, Councillor Wang.
Thank you, Worship, and I appreciate all the comments from around the table, and no doubt there are some of us here that do remember those days just a few years ago when we all had to convene through via Zoom for our council meetings, and we absolutely hope that we do not return to those days. But I appreciate I guess the preference as well of meeting in person, absolutely so. But I think there are also times where schedules unfortunately do just conflict with each other, and there are moments where whether it be sickness, whether it be the members physically not here, not able to be present in person, where the audiovisual link does provide that opportunity for that elected member, especially with these changes, to be here in person, counted as a quorum, and also with their vote counted as well. I think is just moving with the times. The technology is there. That discussion around the improvement of the technology, I know is an ongoing conversation that I'm sure our CE will be heavily chasing up, as we are all aware of. So the other concern I had was just around the confidentiality, especially when we are in the confidential sections of our meetings, where I think the audio-visual link is especially important, just, I guess, to have that added assurance that that elected member is the only one in the room, and so that we can clearly see them, and we can, I guess, just, like I said before, just have that added assurance of confidentiality when we are discussing those issues in confidential. So with that, I'm obviously being the mover, happy to support this. The additional wording, just to, I guess, have a bit of clarification around, again, having a bit of common decency to notify the chair, and also the governance team as well, of any planned instances where we will be attending through telecommunications, but in an emergency also understand that sometimes it may be of short notice if it is an emergency. With that, I'm happy to support this.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wang. We've had some very good discussion on this. Thank you also to elected members for making clear our expectations of ourselves and others as well. I will now put this to the vote. That has been moved by Councillor Wang, seconded by Councillor Brown. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? That is carried. Thank you very much, Rick, for presenting to this. We appreciate that. We'll now move to our final item in the public section, and then we do just have the confirmation of the confidential minutes, which I'm happy to take in public too if there are no questions. But it is my pleasure to invite Paul Warbrick and also Anita Morgan to present this. We're on page 52 of our agenda. Tēnā korua, Anita rawa kōpō, kei a koe, Councillor Waru.
Kia ora, o tira, nā te mea koe nei tō hui tuatahi, nau mai haere mai ki te hinaki o te kauni hera o Rotorua. Ai te tino whakamiharo au I tēnei āhuatanga, ko whakatūhia koe ki tēnei tūranga, so I just thought it'd be quite appropriate to do a little mihi to you, just given your first hui, and it was a pretty heavy kaupapa today too, but you got the shoulders to be able to carry it, and I'm very proud that you've taken this opportunity to be part of the whānau here I Te Kaunihera, and given that I wasn't able to attend your pōhiri also, e mihi atu ana kia koe, nā reira, and kia koe hoki kei taku kuia, aneta tēnā koe, I pupuri te mana o tērā tūranga I te korenga o te tangata ki te whakaki I ngā tapuai, I ngā kaupapa, I ngā mahi, I mahia, ka mahia I roto I tērā tūranga, so kai te mihi kia koe. Thank you very much, e te manukura.
Ngā mihi nui kia koe, Councillor Waru, and Thank you very much for acknowledging Paul, but also Councillor Waru just acknowledged Anita for holding the mana, the authority here in this role. We've really appreciated the work that you have done to do so. So before I hand over, as this is the first time, Paul, that you will be presenting, I do just want to give members of the public and those live streaming a quick background. Paul's whakapapa is to Ngāti Rangitihi, Ngāti Awa, Tūwhare Tōki Kawera, kia ora. And he has actually lived in Rotorua for quite some time, so it's great to have you on board here, although he has come immediately from Whakatane, where he worked as iwi partnership, in iwi partnership as well, but community service is nothing new to Paul, having spent time serving the country with the Navy, correct? And then also in roles such as with Department of Conservation and also specialising in Crown Māori relations and operations. So we acknowledge the experience that you bring, and we also look forward to the value that you will bring as you join a strong team with us here at Rotorua Lakes Council. Nō reira, tēnei te mihi ki a koe, Paul. So we will hand over to you both to present the Te Aroha Partnerships Progress Report. I will ask for a mover and a seconder to receive this report. It's moved by Councillor Kaifong, seconded by Councillor Kiriopa. All those in favour to receive, please say aye. Aye. Thank you, and over to you two.
Tēnā koe te manukura, i te tuatahi, e tautoko ana haunga mihi kua mihia kia koe e te manahautu Te Aroha Haurua, nō reira tēnā koe. We table the report that is, as it's read and invite any questions.
Thank you. And this is from page 52 to page 57. And it is all very self-explanatory. There's been some great mahi that's been underway, so there may be no questions. Councillor Maxwell. Yeah.
On page tēnā kōrua. Page 55, the question I got is on these wānangas that will be held. This one is going to Ngāti Pikiao. We've been fortunate to have this at Rangi where we're here, and I think I went to the one at Tūhaurangi. Is this Ngāti Pikiao's first time that they've had this similar wānanga that I'm talking about, Aneta?
Tēnā koe. Kaunihira Maxwell. Yeah. Through the chair, yes, this is the first one for Ngāti Pikiao. We've found that through the larger iwi, it's taken quite a considerable amount more time to do the engagement, but as a result of it, there's been some profound developments in terms of the mātauranga that will be shared at these larger wānanga with iwi like Ngāti Pikiao and also with Ngāti Tarawhai just last month.
These are very good.
Thank you very much. Councillor Waru.
Tēnā koe te marukura. Tēnā anō kōrua. My pātai is sort of on the same lines. These, I suppose, sessions, wānanga with iwi hapu, from what I've heard, have been quite, or have been well embraced, and given the time frames for our museum and when that finally, finishes and it's complete, have there been any kōrero or any feedback indicating that this kind of interaction will continue?
At this point, the discussions have focused on what's currently happening around the wānanga, but in terms of what it means for te wharetonga o te arawa, definitely there has been interest from iwi to be able to be part of ongoing exhibitions in the museum once it's open.
Ka pai, koina no tāku. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Te Manukura. Tēnā kōrua. Thank you for your report. Just one item stood out for me. Last year, during the Community Matching Fund, rounds, we approved a grant to a very passionate young man who was talking about the civil defence emergency role that marae play in Rotorua. And he was going to work as a facilitator to help enable certain marae to get themselves up to speed, I guess you could say. Have you had any engagement with them at all and their mahi that they were working on?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Patterson. Yes, we have. So that particular gentleman that you're talking about is Hemi Wairea. He was contracted following COVID to be able to engage on our behalf through our civil defence portfolio to do some research around marae resilience. That contract had ended and he actually went out and found more funding to be able to continue that work, and so he's been working with 12 marae across Rotorua to be able to identify what are the challenges for marae and to support them when they need it or when they want it, to be able to look at how do they develop a marae emergency plan. So he still continues to do that, currently seeking more funding to be able to continue that further.
Fantastic, thank you for that.
Thank you very much. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you, welcome, and nice to see you again, Anita. Top of page 56, RLC Rayo classes, cohort 3 began July 30th with 36 staff. This brings the total number of Te Reo Māori learners to date to 104. This is a lot of people. Can you tell us a bit more about the classes and how they work and where they work? Are they conducted on site?
Absolutely, Councillor Lee. We have been running Te Reo Māori classes for our staff here at Council since the signing of the Te Aroha Partnership. So we have 3 different classes per week. Currently they are 1-hour classes, one in the morning on a Tuesday, one on the afternoon on a Tuesday, one in the afternoon on Thursday. And those are the classes that are delivered and continue to be delivered. And I think probably the benefits of those classes you've been able to see across Council in terms of the comfort that staff have in being able to use Te Reo Māori in settings such as these formal ones in Council, as well as in their interactions with Māori in the community.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And elected members are also welcome to attend the Te Reo Māori classes. I know I've certainly benefited from them myself as well when I've gone along. And we'll take one final question from Councillor Waru.
Te Marukura, thank you again for your indulgence, Mihiana. One question is at the end of the report here, translations, cultural advice support requests. How often, and I've always been meaning to ask this, but I keep forgetting at the time, how often are your services in terms of the Aorangi unit called on internally to help out in different units?
Tēnā koe, Councillor Waru. It fluctuates. Of course, a lot of our departments, like marketing and comms, the Mayor's office, those departments that are putting out communications quite regularly, we often work quite closely with them. But it actually comes from right across the whole of the organisation in terms of collateral. For instance, in our transport department, there's lots of communications that have to go out to schools, in particular kura. So Kingi is our translator in the team, and so he's the one that is solely responsible for doing the translations at this point in time.
Kapua, so small team, big value. Ne? Kia ora tātou.
Thank you. That concludes the presentation for Te Aroha Partnerships. Thank you very much. So the final item that we have is just to adopt the confidential minutes. If there are no corrections to it, I'm happy to take a mover and a seconder. Okay, that's moved by Councillor Wang, seconded by Councillor Waru. All those in favour, please say aye. Any against? That is carried. Thank you. That brings today's council meeting to a close. I'd now like to invite Councillor Maxwell to close us with a karakia.
Kia ora koutou katoa. Kia whakairia te tapu, kia wātea ai te ara, kia tūruki whakataha ai, kia tūruki whakataha ai. Haumie, huie, tai ki e. Kia ora koutou.
Thank you very much, everyone. I declare the meeting closed. Thank you, Karen.
Lone Ranger.
Thank you, Karen.